G'day guys, welcome to the broadcast. Let me know that you can hear me loud and clear. I'd like to welcome everyone to the show tonight. That's MCJ Report number 10. That's right, we've made it this far. So I'm just going to give it a minute, wait for people to hop on. So yeah, just go ahead and share the broadcast and let me know that you can hear the transmission loud and clear. I can see quite a lot of you jumping on right now. So I'd like to welcome everyone. We're live on a few different channels tonight. That's right, so we're live on my page, the Morgan Charles Jonas page. We're on Reignite Democracy, and we're also on YouTube. So yeah, a warm welcome to everyone. Let me know. I think that everything's working the way that it should. So let's, without further ado, let's get started with the show. So before I say anything, I just want to give everyone a very big congratulations who showed up on the weekend. That's right, for the protest. It was very warm and encouraging, of course, to see so many people attending the protest in numbers that we haven't seen for a very long time. Maybe we haven't even seen these types of numbers before. So first of all, congratulations to everyone that showed up. And I have to say, and I hope that everyone realizes, that things have definitely changed. The stakes have definitely been taken to a new level. And I'm sure that all of you saw Monica's speech. And I have to say, this has changed a lot for a lot of people. I think everyone now has a bit of a fire lit under their belly after Monica's incredible speech. We've never seen anything like it before. I can tell you, I've been fired up ever since Saturday, and I think that it's time that each and every one of us really digs deep, rolls up our sleeves, and starts fighting, because at the end of the day, we're the only people that are going to take our country back. So yeah, really proud of Monica for this incredible speech. I've never seen anything like it. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. Anyone that was there knows that it was like being in a crowded stadium with the crowd so loud that you couldn't even hear the next person next to you. So the time has come, guys. It is now or never, and we need to all start getting involved. And here's the great news. There's going to be plenty of ways that you can get involved in playing a role in getting our country back. I can see quite a lot of you tuned in right now, so it looks like everything is running as it should. Very, very good. So great stuff, guys. All right, I'm going to get back to the show. We're gonna keep it moving. Okie dokie. All right, so that's right. Maybe some of you have seen this already. Coming up this Saturday, we are coming to Greg Hunt's office. That's right, Greg Hunt, the so-called health minister. Now, he refers to himself as a health minister. I usually prefer to refer to him as something else. But here's the situation. Greg Hunt has a duty of care to the Australian public, especially being a health minister, and he has violated that duty of care. He's done so for a long time. We saw him violate that duty of care when he met with BGI Group and Andrew Forrest and brought those millions of PCR tests into Australia from China, from a Chinese-backed corporation, without even understanding himself truly the origins of these tests, whether they work, and whether or not it's possible the Chinese Communist Party could be harvesting our biometric data via the PCR test and the PCR test reading machinery. Of course, those tests were passed through a provisional approval through the TGA, just like what we saw with the Pfizer vaccine, just like what we recently saw with the AstraZeneca vaccine. Provisional, of course, meaning not a proper approval, not a typical approval that undergoes the usual type of scrutiny that the TGA engages in when approving some type of new drug. The provisional approval is basically like, well, let's just roll it out, give it to the Australian public, and if there happens to be some bad events, maybe if people start getting injured or if they die, we'll reassess. Now, Greg Hunt is the health minister, and he oversaw all of this. And I see this man as a major part of the problem. I don't know if there's something going on between him and Andrew Forrest and the Chinese Consul General that facilitated that very, very questionable meeting just before we brought the PCR tests in. I don't know what's going on with him and Pfizer and AstraZeneca, and why is he so confident? Many people refer to the Pfizer vaccine as a, quote, experimental vaccine due to it having certain ingredients that have never been used before. Yet without any real scrutiny, without looking into any of the adverse events that are taking place all over the world from people that have consumed these vaccines, Greg Hunt looks us in the eye and tells us that this is completely safe. Don't ask questions. Do not question Greg Hunt. He's the health minister. He's the expert, although he does not actually have a background in health, just to make that perfectly clear. And shut up and stick this in your arm. So I particularly take issue to this guy, and I wanted to go down there to his Flinders electorate and call him out for what he is. So this is taking place on Saturday at 2 p.m. in Somerville, and the details are on the poster there. So that's 1/49 Eramosa Road, Somerville. We're going to go down there, me, Monica, Sanjeev, and Matt Lawson, and we're going to speak our mind about this individual and what he has done. All right, anyway, moving forward. I'd like to thank everybody that watched my violated by Pfizer report. That's right. I know that we had problems with the internet connection last night. Or maybe it was the powers to be trying to interfere with the transmission. You know, in this day and age, you really have to question everything. Now, the good news is that I was able to re-upload the full report. It's a little bit over 50 minutes. So it's on YouTube, it's on Facebook, and it's also on Rumble. A lot of people have been telling me to get Rumble, so you can go and check it out. Investigate Pfizer's corporate rap sheet. Okay, now, whether or not somebody takes the vaccine should be a personal choice. Most decent people agree with that. But what we need to also consider are the ethical, and I would argue spiritual implications of dealing with such a dirty organization that has a tremendous history of fraud, unethical practices, criminal behavior. Many people, countless amounts of people have suffered as a result of Pfizer's fraudulent activities. Many people have also lost their lives. So go and check it out, because I think it's only fair and reasonable that we understand the corporation that Scott Morrison and Greg Hunt is demanding that you trust without asking any of your own questions. Always, always question. And that's why it was important to me to make that report. So if you haven't seen it, please go and see it. Share it with your friends and family. Maybe you've got some friends and family on the fence, and maybe after seeing this report, they may think twice about what the government is telling them. Is that fair enough? I think that is fair enough. Now, unfortunately, I can't see the comments tonight. That's right. So I can see that there's a whole bunch of you on Facebook and also on YouTube. I usually like to address people by their first name while doing one of these broadcasts, but I can't do that today because for some reason my comments are disabled. Unless maybe they're not. I'm going to try and fix it up right now, but yeah, it looks like it's not quite happening. But nonetheless, I want to thank everyone that's here right now. We're going to keep this moving. And of course, feel free to share the broadcast. That's right. Probably a lot of you saw this. Mr. Prime Minister who made those certain statements about the COVID-19 vaccine. It was Scott Morrison that said that he would make it as mandatory as it could possibly be, or something to that effect. And then he actually backtracked on those words. Now, Scott Morrison has been, in my opinion, very smug about the vaccine rollout. When questioned on those statements about the vaccine being mandatory, he just shrugged it off and he said something to the effect of, well, we're not going to hold you down and make you take it, as if to imply that anybody that is questioning the vaccine rollout is some type of crazy person that assumes that the government are nothing more than a pack of monsters, although there certainly is an argument to suggest that that is the way that they're behaving in many, many instances. So there, of course, you can see Scott Morrison. In my opinion, he should do the decent thing and take that Australian flag off his face, because I say the way Scott Morrison is behaving, there's nothing Australian about the guy. He's gushing over the COVID-19 vaccine passports. He supports people showing the COVID-19 vaccine passport to cross borders, and we're talking about borders within our own country. So right there we see Scott Morrison being injected with, well, something. I don't know what he's being injected with. I wasn't in the room. I can't tell you if that is the Pfizer vaccine. I can't tell you if it's a placebo. I suppose the government just expects that we take their word for it, the same way they expected us and still expect us to take their word for things like supposedly PCR tests being the, quote, gold standard for detecting the virus known as SARS-CoV-2. All right, so there's Scott Morrison. Clearly, well, the Therapeutic Goods Administration do not allow for marketing of the COVID-19 vaccine. It's only a provisional approval. So it's not as if Pfizer can start making therapeutic claims about the COVID-19 vaccine. That would actually be illegal for them to do so. So in replacement of this marketing void, we see leaders around the world sitting down in their chairs, getting injected with it and saying, hey, look, this is great. If I can do it, you can do it. Anyway, put that in the comments. Do you believe Scott Morrison? Do you believe that's the Pfizer vaccine? Do you think it's something else? I wish I could tell you the answer, but I don't know myself. And just to make it perfectly clear, it's okay to say no. That's right. I posted this meme on my Telegram wall, and this seems to be something that people are forgetting right now. That's right. We've gone our whole lives understanding or being taught, hopefully being taught, that it's okay to say no. It's okay to say no for teenagers that are being peer pressured into taking drugs. It's okay to say no to somebody who wants to inappropriately touch you or something like that. But supposedly now it's not okay to say no to getting injected with a drug that we never asked for and that we don't want. One that has certain ingredients that have never been used in vaccines before. So I just think this is really important, and please remind absolutely everyone that it is okay to say no. And if enough people say no, we will get our way. There's power in numbers, and I truly, truly believe that. It's okay to say no. All right, now there's this person here, an executive from Tennis Australia. I know that a lot of you saw this. This was another great moment over the weekend. The first great moment was Monica's speech, a speech to the likes of which we've never seen before. Absolutely a once-in-a-lifetime event, and I mean that honestly. And then we saw something else very interesting at the tennis, right? The executive here getting booed for praising the government and for making certain statements about the rollout of the vaccine. I'm going to play the clip for you right here.
Challenge. It's been a time of deep loss and extraordinary sacrifice for everyone. And with vaccinations on the way, rolling out in many countries around the world, it's now a time for optimism and hope for the future. So we hope that for those of you at home tonight watching...
So I think that a lot of us like that. Now, it's interesting to point out that there were certain people in the public, including and in public life, including the Deputy Prime Minister, that came out to condemn the audience. Now, it really makes me sick to see people in these positions of power, punching down and lashing out on members at the public. Is it really that unreasonable that the Australian public does not want to be injected with drugs that they didn't ask for and that they don't want? I wouldn't think so. So that was very, very heartwarming to see that response from the crowd, and we're going to keep it moving here. All right, rightio. So just going to read through the news now, just to add on to that little clip that we just saw. We've got here Australian Open fans slammed for booing mention of coronavirus vaccine rollout. So this is coming from Fox News. Fans at the Australia Open were criticised on Sunday after they appeared to boo the mention of a coronavirus vaccine rollout during the men's final trophy presentation, which is fair enough, right? It says here, quote, with vaccinations on the way. Oh, you just heard that. That's what she just said. Now, here we go here. Michael McCormack, out of touch. What is this man doing in his position? It is the reason for the We Are Coming movement is because of people like Michael McCormack, Greg Hunt, Daniel Andrews, etc. It says here, Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack on Monday called the crowd's behaviour, quote, disgusting. Now, should the Deputy Prime Minister be labelling the Australian public as disgusting? The people that pay his bills? How out of touch is this man? This man is biting the hand that feeds him. Michael McCormack, hold on to your seat, buddy. It says here, quote, I don't like booing at any event and certainly any sporting event. Well, like sporting events are some sort of sacred events. What, you're not allowed to boo, you're not allowed to cheer, he told reporters, according to the BBC. It says, quote, this vaccine is going to get our country back to some sort of pre-COVID normality. Well, what's going to get us back to pre-COVID normality is standing up and saying no. So no, Michael McCormack, you're out of touch. You need to learn some respect. You need to respect the people that pay your bills and just piss off and leave us to our affairs. Let's go and take that guy's seat. How about that? All right, and the article just goes on a little bit more to, certain people that got upset that are, clearly people who have not suffered during this tremendous scandal. Anyway, moving forward here. Now, this is really interesting. This was from the protest. Herald Sun journalist, a journalist and a photographer arrested at the Melbourne protest. That's right. So maybe now they will understand our pain, but actually maybe not. The police were very apologetic. I'm going to read to you the article here. Vic Pol has apologised after a journalist and photographer were arrested while reporting on an anti-vaccination protest in Melbourne on Saturday. Well, how about you apologise to us, Victoria Police? How many of us were arrested since last year? How about you apologise to Matt Lawson that you pepper sprayed in the face for absolutely no reason? How about you apologise to Monica that was detained in the back of a police vehicle for 45 minutes for no reason? Or how about me? Or how about everyone that got kettled on Cup Day? Now, Victoria Police, we thought, was here to enforce the law without favour or fear, right? Or to enforce the so-called directions. Not that any of us are buying this rubbish anymore. But what they've shown is, of course, they act with complete bias, and their selectivity in enforcing the so-called chief health officer's directions just happens to fall in line with the ideological outlook of the most out-of-control premier in Victorian history, which is, of course, the CCP protege, Daniel Andrews. All right, so it goes on to say here, quote, in the past 12 months, Victoria Police has seen an increase in hostility, I think, and at these times, violent protests throughout the state. Well, it's not an increase in hostility from the Victorian public. What we've seen is a radical increase in police brutality from Victoria Police. Okay, these people are not trained properly. They're very quick to get their pepper spray out. They're very quick to suppress the human rights of the people that they took an oath to protect. So no, it's not an increase in hostility from the public. It is an increase in hostility from Victoria Police, who are acting on behalf of a man who has authoritarianism in his eyes. So Victoria Police, shame on you. Now, I've got a question for Victoria Police, to any Victoria Police officers who are watching, and I know that you're probably watching. You show up to my house, you call me on the phone, so why wouldn't you be watching my broadcast? Which is, when is enough enough? What point will it take for you to take your uniform off and say, I'm not willing to do this to my fellow Victorians? Is it when you're ordered to forcefully remove people from their homes to transport them to quarantine facilities? Is it when you're ordered to shoot people at protests who are, in your words, acting, quote, hostile? At what point does Victoria Police stop, quote, following orders? Or do they never stop following orders? Are they simply no different from the Chinese military in Tiananmen Square in 1989, who were ordered to open fire on protesters, live ammunition that should be used in wars, not on unarmed protesters? So my question to you is, when do you think, if you think, Victoria Police will refuse to, quote, follow orders? Now, Victoria Police are not meant to enforce unlawful laws and unlawful directions. But that didn't matter to the people at Tiananmen Square. It didn't matter on Saturday when Matt Lawson was sprayed in the face, point blank range, and who was not acting hostile or aggressive or anything like that. So one really has to ask the question, if Victoria Police are willing to go this far, how much further are they willing to go? Now, personally, I think that they could be willing to go all the way, and which is why now it's more important than any time ever before that the people rise up and say no to the vaccine, no to these non-evidence-based directions that are destroying our lives. And eventually, should this movement grow to the size which we think it can grow to, Victoria Police will have no choice but to essentially stand down and stand with the people. And I think that's the way that it needs to go. Now, the article goes on to here say, quote, our police do a great job day in, day out, often in difficult circumstances. But on occasion, issues like this arise and we must learn from them to maintain the balance between individual rights, enforcing health directions and media reporting. Individual rights, Victoria Police have no clue about individual rights. They've shown that they're willing to trample all over our individual rights based on nothing more than non-evidence-based abusive policies which are enforced by the government under the fake pretense of keeping us safe, all right? And which are not enforced equally for everybody, as demonstrated by Invasion Day, as opposed to, of course, the protest that happened over the weekend. So Victoria Police, pull your head in, shame on you, shame of the nation. Moving forward. Yeah, so there's Scott Morrison there getting the jab. He said in relation to this jab, whatever that jab happens to be, We're here making some very important points. Right? This is a very important point that he's making clearly. Morrison said moments before the cameras captured the first person being injected at a medical centre in Sydney, quote, that it is safe, that it's important, and we need to start those who are the most vulnerable on the front line. Well, the data from the CDC in the United States suggests something a little bit different from the Prime Minister. It suggests that every day the adverse events are racking up from people that took the COVID vaccine and then shortly after something bad happened to them, some type of injury or in many cases death. We're seeing these cases popping up all over the world. Europe, the UK, Asia, the United States, adverse events shortly after certain people took the vaccine. And of course, health authorities and the media all around the world are very quick to blame it on something else. They say, well, this was due to a delayed immune response. Well, that guy died because he was old, or that person died because they had pre-existing conditions. Now, maybe Scott Morrison is just so busy that he hasn't seen these reports, and he genuinely believes that he's being as honest and truthful as he can be with the Australian public. What do you think? Do you think he's, obviously I'm joking around here. I think Scott Morrison I think his language is very dangerous, and he's I think he's playing with fire, and he's playing with the health and safety of the Australian public. So all jokes aside, it's disgraceful. It says here, doses of the Pfizer inoculations, which need to be kept at temperatures well below freezing, still being distributed to 16 vaccine hubs around Australia in preparation for broader rollout. The Pfizer inoculations. Maybe Mr. Scott Morrison should watch my Pfizer documentary. Scott, do you really think that Australia should be engaging with Pfizer on this level, given their history of fraud, given their history of promoting off-label use, given their history of withholding important information from patients regarding the potential for certain serious short-term and long-term side effects? Is that not something that you've considered? Well, clearly not, and that's why I made the presentation that is called Violated by Pfizer. So you can go to YouTube or Rumble at Morgan C. Jonas, watch the presentation, because you, the Australian consumer, have a right to know what the government is getting you into. You have a right to make an informed decision whether or not you want to consume the products of this corporation that is worth more than $200 billion US, a corporation that routinely spends millions of dollars lobbying US lawmakers for favorable policy, whereby one can certainly argue the motivation behind it is not to serve in the best interest of public health, but to serve in the best interest of Pfizer's shareholders. It's disgraceful. Scott Morrison, I'm ashamed of you. All right, moving on. So what do we have here? We have Safe Work Australia. Now, some people actually got a little bit excited over this and said, hey, Safe Work Australia has come out and said that there's not going to be any mandatory vaccinations and that employers can't enforce it, etc. And unfortunately, I think some people may have been jumping the gun a little bit. So I'm going to actually read you through what Safe Work Australia is actually saying about mandatory vaccines in the workplace. Now, I'm just going to make sure we're connected. I can see people on the Morgan C. Jonas Facebook. How you going? People on YouTube, and of course, people on Reignite Democracy. So once again, I can't see your comments. I wish I could, but I want to say thank you to everyone who's tuned in right now. It's great to have you guys here. I'm looking forward to heading down to Greg Hunt's office. This guy I consider to be a menace. I would consider him a menace to society that has violated his duty of care as health minister to the Australian people. So this is going to take place at his office. And am I going to see you there Saturday, 2 o'clock? I hope so. I'm keen. I'm ready to go. All right. Anyway, getting back to it. From Safe Work Australia, I'm just going to read down here. This is in relation to COVID-19 vaccines in the workplace, whether they can be mandatory, whether they can be enforced, etc. It says here, quote, there are currently no laws or public health orders in Australia that specifically enable employers to require their employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Okay, so you got to look at the language here. There are currently no laws, but they're leaving the door open. Currently there's not, but maybe later there will. That's how I read that. How do you read it? Do you see that the same, or do you see it differently? It says here, do I have to make sure my workers are vaccinated under the laws, the safe work laws? It says here, it is unlikely that a requirement for workers to be vaccinated will be reasonably practical. Okay. It is unlikely that a requirement for workers to be vaccinated will be reasonably practical. That means absolutely nothing. It tells you nothing about the future, and it tells you nothing about now. These are empty words. Make no mistake about it. Do I need to include mandatory vaccination as a control measure to comply with my duties? Again, it is unlikely that a requirement to be vaccinated will be reasonably practical. That means, again, absolutely nothing. It goes on to a whole list of, will your workers be exposed to risk of infection, etc. Can I require customers and visitors to prove they have been vaccinated before entering my workplace? It is unlikely that laws will require you to ask customers and visitors for proof of vaccination. It's unlikely the laws will require you to. And this is what it is. So basically, after reading this entire page on Safe Work Australia, I was left with absolutely zero, no more knowledge than before I started reading the page. So as far as I'm concerned, this entire publication from the 19th of February from Safe Work Australia tells us absolutely nothing. If you think I'm missing something, I'm a pretty thorough person, so I had a good look through it. It's a big nothing burger. All right, moving on here to the other vaccine. That's right, the other vaccine that just received the provisional approval, right? Provisional approval from the Department of Health. The Therapeutic Goods Administration. Scandal dogs AstraZeneca's vaccine partner in China. All right, so we have some very shifty looking behavior from AstraZeneca in China. I mean, Pfizer as well, but this is about AstraZeneca. And by the way, if you believe that the violated by Pfizer report is of value, and if you'd like me to make one on AstraZeneca, then I'm happy to do that as well. Just put that in the comments. All right, it says here, quote, the British-Swedish drug maker has joined with a huge Asian company to produce a COVID-19 vaccine in China, where shady reputations are common in the pharmaceutical industry. Now, what it means by where shady reputations are common is that the way it works in China is there's no regard for international intellectual property. So if a certain company in China can produce a net profit for China by a certain product that is from stolen intellectual property, it can do so. Now, the pharmaceutical industry in China is particularly interesting, and a few years ago, I actually investigated it. I wasn't making these types of videos back then. I did it solely for my curiosity. That's right. This is like some of the things that go on in my head, because I knew that China was dominating mass production of pharmaceuticals, and I wanted to see how they were doing it. So in China, you've got legitimate drug manufacturing labs that have really high capacity, that are ISO certified and have reasonable checks and balances. But what you also have is a massive chain of these, what we would refer to as, say, garage drug labs, although they're not set up in garages, they're set up in apartments because, of course, in Chinese cities, there's lots of high-rise buildings. Now, there's no health and safety regulations in these apartment labs. There's no checks and balances. They're dirty environments. I looked into it myself and actually got some footage of some of these places. And they're allowed to function. They're completely permitted by the, quote, health authorities or the Chinese Communist Party because they produce a net benefit to China, because these are export industries. So the Chinese Communist Party turns a blind eye to dangerous pharmaceutical practices in China because these practices result in tremendous net profits. I suppose not much different from Pfizer when they pay off certain officials, but in China it's just so blatant and it's so obvious. Anyway, I'm gonna keep reading down here. As a government, it says, as a government regulator, this is telling us a story. Sat into a car, the Chinese pharmaceutical executive handed over a paper bag stuffed with $44,000 in cash. The executive, Dr. Wei Min, was eager to get his company's vaccines approved, and he needed help. The official took the money and vowed to try his best, according to court documentation from 2016. Several months later, Mr. Du got the green light and began clinical trials for 2 vaccines. They were ultimately approved. And what sort of clinical trials were these? God only knows. Generating tens of millions of dollars in revenue. The government official was jailed for taking bribes from Dr. Du and several other vaccine makers. All right, so they jailed the Chinese Communist Party member because he was making money on the side. All right, but get this. Mr. Du was never charged. Okay, so the man producing this drug network was never charged, because he proved to be a valuable asset to China. It was because of this dirty drug manufacturing that he was able to export drugs, bring money in, and provide greater benefits to other people, maybe a little bit higher up in the chain of command of the Chinese Communist Party. It says here, he built an empire. His company, the Shenzhen Kangtai Biological Products, is one of China's largest vaccine makers, and without a doubt, undeniably tied to the Chinese Communist Party. And this is a corporation that is partnering with AstraZeneca. So AstraZeneca is involved. It says here, capitalizing on that success, Mr. Du and his company are now at the forefront of the global race to produce coronavirus vaccine, a national priority for China's ruling Chinese Communist Party. Kangtai will be the exclusive manufacturer in mainland China for the vaccine, made by British-Swedish pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca. And the companies could work together on deals for other countries. Yeah, so I think that I need to actually do this report on AstraZeneca. Do you think it makes a difference? Be honest with me. The whole reason why I do these reports is I want to reach out to people who are on the fence to help inform consumers so they can better make an informed decision. Many of the reasons why people are so happy to get these vaccines is simply because they don't know any better. They don't realize the ethical implications of coerced drug injection or the shady histories of these corporations. Anyway, that was just a thought that I had, so put that in the comments. I just thought this was pretty interesting. I'm going to let you think of this as you will. This is from the Pfizer website. Currently, Pfizer are looking for more jobs, they're looking to employ more people in China than they are in the United States. So this is just something small that I came across that I'm going to get into more on a later date, on a later show, because I'm very curious to see what type of work Pfizer is doing with the Chinese Communist Party. But anyway. Here's something else interesting with Pfizer and AstraZeneca. The connections with the CCP just keep growing and growing. There's more information coming out all the time. This was from last December when we witnessed a huge data leak from the Chinese Communist Party database of their party members and what types of businesses they're involved in around the world and what types of practices they're involved in. And what we found out is that Chinese Communist Party members are allegedly employed with Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and other global firms. So, again, more shady questions raised over these organizations that Scott Morrison is looking you in the eye and telling you to trust. This is pretty interesting here. This is from Advance Australia. So I suppose Advance Australia you'd describe as an NGO, a political group that engages in activism and influence and things like that. It says here, quote, so this is the article, CCP tells Australia to show more respect. And that's coming from the Victorian Tasmanian Consul General Long Zhu, this fella here. Now, some of you may remember this guy. All right, this is not the first time that he has been smug, and this is not the first time he's acted in a very questionable manner, and I'll get into that in a bit. This man is a bigger player than what a lot of people give him credit for. I really think so, and I'll tell you why. It says here, quote, Australia should treat China and China's development objectively and rationally, abandon ideological prejudices, and truly uphold the principles of mutual respect, like how China mutually respects us, right? When they hold our coal ships up in their waters, when they put a proposal in to build a super city 200 kilometers north of Queensland. Is that respecting us? Anyway, I'm going to stay on topic. And equal treatment. I mean, China, how about you give equal treatment to the Uyghur minorities living in the western province of East Turkestan or the people of Tibet? Whenever you hear this, the Chinese Communist Party preaching about equality and mutual respect, it's kind of like a sociopath. Anyone who's been in a relationship with a sociopath would know that it's always do as I say, not as I do. Accusing somebody of being guilty of what you yourself are guilty of. And that's what this whole China-Australia relationship is. It's one big abusive relationship where unfortunately our short-sighted politicians for far too long now have put all of our economic eggs in one Chinese basket. And now this is a massive mess that needs to be untangled. And I believe it can only be truly untangled by seriously rearranging the seats in our parliament. And you know what? That is what the We Are Coming movement is all about. Anyway, I'm going to get back to this because I'm all over the place now. Equal treatment in handling bilateral relations, as in relations between Australia and China, and actively promote China-Australia relations to return to the track of normal and healthy developments as soon as possible. Okay, so our relationship with China has never been healthy. Okay, it's always been our politicians signing off for foreign investment, selling off our sovereignty, allowing the acquisition of national assets that are of great strategic importance to us, like the Port of Darwin, such as mining rights, such as Keswick Island in Queensland, and so much more. Huge amounts of farmland. Tasmania is basically owned by China now. Daniel Andrews signed the Belton Road Initiative. It says here, quote, a professor of public ethics at the Charles Sturt University, Clive Hamilton, said, "This is the boilerplate Communist Party language. Last time I looked, bullying, subversion, and economic coercion were not listed under the principles of mutual respect and equal treatment." Yeah, so bullying, he's referring to the economic standover tactics. We call for an inquiry into COVID-19, or we blacklist Huawei from building the 5G network in Australia. How does China respond? They stop buying our products. They decimate our wine industry. They decimate our dairy industry. Why were they able to decimate these industries? Because our stupid, short-sighted politicians, instead of diversifying our export markets, took the easy money, the easy way out, and directed all of our trade to China and put us and played our nation and our economy right into the hands of a rising expansionist totalitarian state that is doing everything in its power to not just export its industrial reach throughout the world, but also its ideology, the ideology of totalitarianism. And that's what our government did to us. It was short-sighted. It resulted in the offshoring of a huge part of our manufacturing industry and decomplexified our economy. We used to have a very complex economy in Australia. We used to build and manufacture many different things. Now, what do? We dig holes in the ground. We don't even refine our own resources. We dig those resources out, we put them on boats, we send it to China. Well, now we're scrambling because we need to find other markets because of the short-sightedness of our politicians and the lazy trade deals they formed over the past 40 years, which have really hurt us tremendously. Who here remembers back to the 80s, where you could have one person working in a household and it would be a sufficient amount of money? Try doing that today. Why is that? Our economy's growing. Our dollar's gotten stronger. So why is it that the average family is struggling more today than they were in the 80s? And the reason for that is we've seen a tremendous shift of wealth in our country. We've seen a succession of trade deals which have benefited certain industries. Okay, I dare say mining, and as a result of that, a smaller part of the country has reaped a ever increasing majority of the economic advances we've made over that time period. I want to talk about that a little bit more. Now, Scott Morrison appears to be doing some decent things to invest in Australian innovation. Don't get me wrong, he does plenty of indecent things. My concern is that it could be too little too late, but we'll talk about that on another episode. And as I said, at this stage, I think that the vast majority of people that wear suits and sit in seats within the walls of our parliament have done a terrible job, and I would say the vast majority of them need to be replaced. What do you think? Put that in the comments. All right, so this guy here, Long Zhu, the guy that made those disparaging remarks about Australia, that right there you see is Greg Hunt and Long Zhu. Greg Hunt acted in a very interesting way to Long Zhu at a press conference that was held early last year with Andrew Forrest. The three men spoke. Andrew Forrest, Greg Hunt and Long Zhu to announce the importation of 10 million PCR tests into Australia, produced by the Chinese Communist Party-backed BGI group that is undeniably linked to some of the most heinous crimes against humanity. This guy here, a high-ranking CCP member, the Victorian Tasmanian Consul General, showed up in the meeting to proclaim China's commitment to so-called helping Australia during this so-called pandemic. And Greg Hunt was gushing over this man. You should have seen him. Actually, you can go onto my BitChute channel and look up my Don't Get Tested presentation on the PCR test. I actually play the clip. Greg Hunt was thanking Long Zhu. Long Zhu, I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. It was basically like he was bowing down to the guy. It was absolutely disgusting to watch. And now you see what's happening. Any chance to take a swipe at Australia at our spirit, at our nature, Long Zhu's taking it. And Greg Hunt was, basically kissing this guy's butt. So I wanted to remind you of that. And that Greg Hunt never bothered to look into Long Zhu, as far as I know, Long Zhu's connections with BGI. It is public information that Long Zhu knows BGI and has some type of relationship with BGI. So I wonder why Greg Hunt never bothered to look into BGI's alleged human rights abuses. Why did he not look into their gene bank in China that BGI manages? Why did he not look into the cycle threshold of the BGI PCR tests, which BGI itself admits are super sensitive? We're talking about around 40 cycles here, which we know, based on the advice of many professionals around the world, is too high. Greg Hunt didn't look into any of that. He's the health minister. He expects you to trust him. He had no problem with those tests being provisionally approved, as he has no problem with the Pfizer vaccine. Greg Hunt needs to be called out for his violation, okay? He has violated his duty of care to the Australian public, and I'm telling you right now, I'm not happy about it. All right, moving on here. More things brewing in the South China Sea. I'm going to play a little clip for you here, actually.
And then 200 miles is international waters. Everyone shares that.
Maybe not.
But there's one country that doesn't believe in you.
I'm going to play you this clip. It goes for 3 minutes. It's actually pretty good. It's from news.com.au. It's a bit of an overview of the South China Sea, the economic exclusive zones of the nations nearby. It's important. It is relevant to Australia because China is expansionist. China is occupying all the surrounding nations around the Indo-Pacific. They're trying to build cities in Papua New Guinea. China wants our land. They want our resources. And we need to hopefully see the advancement of a strong United States so we can continue putting pressure on them. I'm going to play this video for you. It's a really good little explanation. That's if the video wants to play. Just give me a second. 1 second, guys. Is it going to play?
The South China Sea is one of the world's busiest waterways, but it's also a hotbed for global conflict.
It's not China's maritime empire.
Just like the United States, you might wish to do anything that you believe necessary on your own territory. So China is no exception.
To Australia's north, several different countries lay competing claims to parts of this body of water, and those overlapping claims mean tensions are constantly brewing. The region is believed to be incredibly rich in natural resources, holding an estimated 11 billion barrels of oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. It also accounts for 10% of the world's fisheries, making it a vital food source for hundreds of millions of people. At the same time, around 30% of the world's total shipping trade flows through here. So basically, the South China Sea is kind of a big deal. The biggest dilemma around the South China Sea is who owns what. 6 different countries bordering the ocean mass lay claims to the region, so that's China, Malaysia, Brunei, the Philippines, Vietnam and Taiwan. Most of these countries base their claims off the international law of the sea set out by the United Nations, which states that the country's territorial waters extend 200 miles off their shoreline. This is called the Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ. So for example, any oil found 200 miles off the coast of Vietnam would belong to Vietnam. Outside of this, so any further into the ocean than 200 miles, is international waters. Everyone shares that. But there's one country that doesn't believe in using the UN law to determine its claims. When the UN established the 200-mile law in 1973, China was basically like, not for us, and ignored claims made by other countries. China argues it has a historical claim to the South China Sea and set out its own boundaries. China's boundaries, which we call the 9-dash line, encompasses 90% of the South China Sea and crosses into other countries' claims to certain parts of the ocean. Now, why should Australia care? This is happening way north of us and we don't have any claims in the South China Sea. But the United States, one of our closest security allies, has wide-ranging commitments in East Asia. The US doesn't make any of its own claims to the water, but several of its allies border the region. This has led to growing tensions between the US and China in recent years.
We are not naive about these tensions, these pressures, these issues. And that is not the suppression or the containment of any one state. It's about the productive and strategic balance that can be achieved.
But it's not quite that simple. The more tensions between the US and China build, the more pressure we face to throw our defence force into the ring alongside the US. And the more willing we appear to do that, the more threats we'll face from China. In previous years, China has directly targeted Australia over the South China Sea through its state media, warning us to keep out. It's hard to tell exactly how the battle over the South China Sea will be resolved, but what we do know is this: peace and stability are never guarantees, and Australia can never fully keep clear of the conflict.
Yeah, so that was a decent little explanation there from news.com.au. I was actually pretty surprised. I didn't expect them to produce something that was informative like that. But yeah, that somewhat summarises the South China Sea and the conflict going on there and how Australia gets brought into it. I guess I'm not a fan of acting in timid ways, whether it's us out protesting or whether it's Australians' foreign policy. So what the reporter there was suggesting was that, well, if Australia gets involved in the South China Sea, and keep in mind that these are our maritime trading routes, we need to use these oceans and we need free access to these oceans so we can trade freely, which is, of course, vital to the life of the Australian economy. But yet, of course, what this individual is suggesting is that, well, if you anger China, China may retaliate. Now, I think it's really important now more than ever before that hopefully China, US, Japan, India, the democratic nations of the world can further these pacts, these military alliances that we've been seeing, these loose coalitions, to hopefully counter China in these regions. I mean, there's so many issues going on, right? We have the domestic issues here at home with our government running crazy over the COVID restrictions, trying to stick drugs in everyone's arm. We've got conflicts in our immediate geopolitical region and the very real likelihood that perhaps China will overtake the United States as the world's dominant power, dominant maritime power. And it can seem a little bit overwhelming. But once again, what this comes down to is taking back control of our parliaments. That's the only way anything's going to work. I'm going to read to you a little bit of the article here. It says, worrying new satellite imagery suggests China is building, quote, full-blown military bases on controversial artificial islands in the South China Sea. All right, now there was also a report that came out recently that China is allegedly building a missile base just 20 kilometers north of Vietnam. So what's to stop China from building a military base or a missile launching pad in somewhere like Papua New Guinea or somewhere like Vanuatu or Fiji, where China has tremendous interests, or who knows, Keswick Islands, right? Is that really a silly question? Is that out of the question that China may do that? I don't think so. It says here, quote, a report by geospatial software company Similarity has revealed what appears to be infrastructure for radars, antenna mounts, and what could be a potential military base on Mischief Reach. Classified as an atoll, a ring-shaped coral reef located 250 kilometers from the Philippines, the landmass has been occupied and controlled by the People's Republic of China since 1995. So here's the first image right there. The Philippines are always in disputes with China about their sovereign claims to certain parts of the South China Sea, specifically their exclusive economic zone. But in the words of the president of the Philippines, they can't do anything about it. So the Philippines president was forced to admit that China has the military, they don't, that's where it ends. When the Philippines did speak out about these disputes and started to really raise their voices, China responded by halting Filipino agricultural imports. So they attacked the Filipino economy, just like they've attacked our economy. We also China stopped sending tourists to the Philippines. So this is how it works with China. China is a bully and will use these coercive economic standover tactics in order to, I suppose, bully countries into adopting some type of national or foreign policy that best suits China's agenda, whilst of course racking up votes at the United Nations and basically pillaging other nations. This is colonialism, but it's done through economic means. Anyway, reading on here, one image dated May 7th, 2020 clearly shows an empty plot of space which is now occupied by a 16-meter wide cylindrical structure, which Similarity claims could be a possible antenna mount structure. Another shot also shows a concrete structure with a spherical radome, a weatherproof enclosure used to protect a radar antenna cover nearby. It says here, quote, the addition of new radars appear to indicate they're really expanding the capabilities of this artificial island. and then the fact it is continuing despite everything that has been going on in the rest of the world, it really indicates the intention of China to really fully develop these islands into full-blown military bases. Why wouldn't they? China has global ambitions, including but not limited to industrialization and militarization. China wants to be the #1 power in the world, wants to be the biggest nuclear power, superpower, maritime power. Instead of achieving this objective by traditional military means, they're doing so through economics and debt trap diplomacy and picking off weak politicians that are susceptible to corruption, like, you know, people like Daniel Andrews. So here are some images right here. There we see the Chinese Coast Guard. It was, back in last month, the Chinese Communist Party authorized the Chinese Coast Guard to open live fire on other ships traveling through what China considers to be its sovereign waters. That's right. So China considers the South China Sea, Taiwan, around Japan, the Senkaku Islands to be its sovereign waters, and has given the Coast Guard authority to open fire on other ships and other vessels. We haven't seen them do it yet, so you have to ask yourself the question, is this all talk? Does China really want to get into a conflict, potentially with an ally of the United States or with the United States? Personally, I don't think so, but maybe you see it differently, and if you do, why don't you go ahead and put that in the comments. All right, so that's it for that article right there. And that's really the end of the show. I really wish I could see the comments, because I can see that there's a lot of you tuned in right now. I can see there's about 600 people across all platforms. I'm really happy that you guys are here. I'm disappointed I can't see the comments. For some reason, the comment little box function tool that I have is not working. So I'll go ahead and wrap the show up. So make sure that you go ahead and follow me on Telegram. That's Morgan C. Jonas. And follow Reignite Democracy Australia on Telegram as well, which is at Reignite Democracy Australia, because we don't know how long we're going to be on Facebook for. This could all be over, and the last thing we want is to lose touch with everyone. That's right. So that's my website there, mcjreport.com. If you haven't done so already, go ahead, put your email in, sign up to my free newsletter, and that way you'll stay up to date with all developments. Of course, we are heading down to Greg Hunt's office right there. So that is happening this Saturday. We're going to call this man out for the terrible violation of duty of care that he has demonstrated to the Australian people. And yeah, you're going to see it's going to be interesting. It's going to be energetic. People like Greg Hunt, they don't deserve to represent the Australian people, okay? They've had it comfortable. They've had it too good for too long. They're too complacent. They're too willing to put their careers ahead of the people. They're too willing to put their careers ahead of our dignity. You know, there is no more demoralizing than forcing an individual to have something injected into their body without, unless it's their decision. You know, we hear the government saying, well, this is not mandatory, you don't have to take it. Yet the government is using such strongly coercive measures to try and force this vaccination. It's like nothing we've ever seen before in our lifetime. And Greg Hunt is a massive part of the problem. He doesn't deserve to represent us. I say he doesn't deserve to be in Parliament. He deserves to be somewhere else, okay? Let's just say somewhere else for now. I'm going to be nice. If you have a suggestion on where you think he should be, you can put that in the comments. So that's coming up this Saturday, 2 p.m, 1/49, Eremos